but let me just tell you how delighted I am to have been here with you this weekend. I realize that in my job, I don't do much preaching, but I realize that all the preaching I've done since, March 2020 has been recorded or at a distance. And so this is the first time I've been able to step into a pulpit and see real people. So that's lovely. And I bring you greetings from all of us at the Mid-America Region staff. But I also want to thank you for your overwhelming generosity to the Unitarian Universalist Association. For more than 35 years, your congregation has given what we have asked you to give to support our ability to be here with you. Not many congregations have a record that is so stellar, and so thank you for that as well. Now, some of you are past your first impressions part of me because you were with me either Friday night or tomorrow as I worked with you this weekend. For others, today may be your first impression. And at a risk of scoring badly on the first impressions, I want to confess to something. I've not read much Charles Dickens. In fact, I've only ever read A Christmas Carol and seen versions of it on TV. And I haven't read Great Expectations, but I thought that this wonderful quote I knew was from that. I think Great Expectations is about Pip, but I could be wrong about that. And I thought this, as I said, this famous paragraph that I'll share in a moment was also from that, but it's not. It's from A Tale of Two Cities, which I also haven't read. Is that the one that's about Pip? I don't know. Some of you, I'm sure, can educate me later as to what I should have known, and maybe I'll do penance by reading both books. But regardless of what I remember or not, it's still a great reading, and it applies to what I'm talking about, so here it goes. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. We had everything before us, we had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven, we were all going direct the other way. In short, the period was so far like the present period that some of its noisiest authorities insisted on its being received for good or evil, and the superlative degree of comparison only. Now, the second reading is from something I have read, and I know where it's from. Adrienne Rich, who is a poet known mostly for her poetry, also wrote a piece called Women in Honor, Some Notes on Lying in 1975. And here's what Adrienne wrote. Why do we feel slightly crazy when we realize we have been lied to in a relationship? We take so much of the universe on trust. You tell me in 1950 I lived on the north side of Beacon Street in Somerville. You tell me she and I were lovers, but for months now we have only been good friends. You tell me it's 70 degrees outside and the sun is shining. Because I love you, because there is not a question of lying between us, I take these accounts of the universe on trust. Your address 25 years ago, your relationship with someone I only know by sight, this morning's weather. I fling unconscious tendrils of belief like slender green threads across statements such as these, statements made so unequivocally, which I have no tone or shadow of tentativeness. I build them into the mosaic of my world. I allow my universe to change in minute, significant ways on the basis of things you have said to me, of my trust in you. I have faith that you are telling me things that it is important I should know, that you do not conceal facts from me in an effort to spare me spare me or yourself pain. Or at the very least, that you will say, there are things I am not telling you. When we discover someone we trusted can be trusted no longer, it forces us to re-examine the universe, to question the whole instinct and concept of trust. For a while, we are thrust back onto some bleak, jutting ledge in a dark pierced by sheets of fire, swept by sheets of rain, in a world before kinship or naming or tenderness exist. We are brought close to formlessness. So now you've heard my first confessions, that I haven't read enough Dickens and that I don't remember what I never knew firsthand. But yes, this has been the best and worst of times. As I met with several of you on Friday night, we talked about, and you all re-experienced, some of the harder emotions of being in community. We talked about the hard endings and hard times with several of your past ministers, Stephen Sinclair, Scott McNeil, Cindy Simpson. The difficulty with the pandemic, the frustration and worry as you got the impression that there must be something wrong with you. I learned how the concept of covenant was used as a weapon to stop you from thinking that something weird was going on, and that things that weren't right were actually okay. Some of you sometimes tentatively would say, I don't think this is best, only to be told that you were the problem. What an abuse of power and a narrowing and distortion of the noble concept of covenant, which should call us all, minister and layperson alike, into a more trusting, more truthful, loving community and possibilities. As Adrienne Rich wrote, when we discover someone we trusted can be trusted no longer, it forces us to re-examine the universe, to question the whole instinct and concept of trust. For a while, we are thrust back onto some bleak, jutting ledge in a dark pierced by sheets of fire, swept by sheets of rain, in a world before kinship or naming or tenderness exist. We are brought close to formlessness. So let me start this morning by saying there is nothing wrong with you. You are a powerful, delightful, amazing group of people who have persevered through some really tough times. Much of it was not your fault. Or was it one of you who created the COVID virus in your backyard lab? With all that you have gone through, lesser congregations would have simply ceased to exist, or wouldn't have been brave enough to risk venturing into ministerial search again. You did not allow yourselves to be pulled into formlessness as the lying by deed, by absence, by presence surrounded you. Instead, you fought against that and went forward with your dream. And this time you were rewarded, finally, with a minister that believes in you in Reverend Juniper, and with whom you can share this precious congregation. Let me repeat now what I said on Friday night. I apologize for the Unitarian Universalist Association's part in the hard times you have had. No, we did not create COVID either in our backyard labs, but we could have been more support to you in the area concerning your relationships with ministers. It's cold comfort, I know, to realize that neither Stephen nor Scott are in fellowship with the UUA anymore. I lose the details. I can't remember if they resigned pending investigations or if they were actually removed from fellowship, but they are no longer in our community. Again, it's cold comfort, but know that you weren't alone in having hard times with them. You were not the only ones they lied to. I am sorry that we failed you, and I am very glad that you did not fail yourselves. You did your best, and as I said before, your strength and resilience was great enough that you didn't give up on your dream of shared ministry. Would that we could bottle up what you have and share it with other congregations that have not fared as well. So let me switch gears just a bit here. Several years ago, there was a news story about one of my divinity school classmates I heard on the radio. Now, Tori was a fierce and independent woman, to be sure. A Presbyterian by upbringing and choice, she also was an adventurer. Just to give you a sense of her, for her senior paper in divinity school, she wrote about adventure. But not just an academic paper. It was a reflection paper that that winter, she became one of the first 2 American women to ski unsupported to the South Pole. She talked about how, because it was the Antarctic summer, the high was a balmy minus 44 degrees. And she talked about the vastness of the terrain, the pitting herself against not a foe, but the companions in the natural world. That's just so you know who she is. But that wasn't the story I heard, though. The one I heard was that Tori had just become the first woman to row a boat across the Atlantic Ocean. Yeah, crazy, just a little strange. I hadn't heard about her first attempt where she got 2/3 of the way across the Atlantic and then got caught up in Hurricane Danielle that capsized her and turned her end over end and side over side about 13 or 14 times, cracked her ribs and collarbone, and necessitated her rescue. Now, that might have been the end of her rowing career, but her friend Muhammad Ali, yes, her friend Muhammad Ali, asked whether she wanted to be known as the woman who almost rowed across the Atlantic Ocean. So Tori tried again, and this time she made it. Of course, she was on all the talk shows with the model of the boat showing how it had spun this way and that. And inevitably, the host would say or ask something like, "It must have been really difficult to row across the Atlantic." And Tori, in true Tori fashion, said, "No, it wasn't hard. Rowing across the Atlantic was easy. I was by myself. I could make all my own decisions. I didn't have to make a single compromise. Rowing across the Atlantic wasn't difficult. It's living in community that is. It's living in community that's difficult. Yes, because in community, we aren't in control, we aren't in charge as much as we long to be. There are divergent views about what should be done, what is right, all based on how we interpret and choose among the many competing values. The right of the individual, the needs of the community, the freedom, accountability, responsibility for ourselves and each other. What should that be like? Rarely do we see the answers in the same way, or even see the problem the same way. Our own experience, needs, longings, interests, identities pull us to divergent perspectives. What might be best for an individual might not be best for a community, and vice versa. There is rarely one satisfactory answer for every person. We struggle to know what to do, and being human, we all make mistakes. Leaders are put in untenable places where they have to make unpopular choices. Such was, for sure, the situation during the pandemic. How do we keep people safe? Whose needs? Those of the most vulnerable to the disease, or those most vulnerable because of isolation, and all those in between? Whose needs predominate? Such tough questions, and leaders can never make everyone happy, including themselves. I give deep thanks for those of you who led through the pandemic, and to ministers and staff who, in an instant, had to learn their jobs all over again, and the valiant efforts of so many of you to get online to get you going. Hopefully, we won't need to learn to adapt so quickly and completely again. But you know what? If we do, I'm going to check in with you all because you have learned so much and I want to learn and grow with you. Conflict is inevitable when we are in community and faced by both human and scientific challenges. Conflict, when handled well, is how we make better decisions than we would have made alone as we consider other perspectives that are unlike what we think. Without low-level conflict, we won't grow, we won't learn new things, and we won't stretch ourselves to be something more than we could have been. The tough part is when conflict heats up beyond mere disagreement, what do we do with the hurt, the anger, the harm that has been done to us? How do we know the next step? My mother was a first grade teacher, but not like your typical first grade teacher. She always taught in an open format school system without grading. She thought kids learn best through story and field trips, and boy, did she take field trips. And she was also an anti-war advocate. She had been a wave in the Second World War, and as she changed, and over time after that, she turned to counseling young men about being conscientious objectors, withheld income tax that went to fund war and other things. One of the stories that she shared with her students, and I got to learn as an adult, was the story of Sadako and the 1,000 Cranes. It may be familiar to some of you, and maybe not. Sadako was 2 years old when the US dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. She was badly irradiated then and was able to survive for 10 years. She knew of the Japanese legend that someone who folded 1,000 origami cranes, like the ones hanging there, would be granted their wish. And so she started folding cranes, but the wish for a longer life did not come true for Sadako. Hearing that story and watching my mother's transformation into an anti-war activist made a deep impression on me. One of my life goals became to go to Hiroshima to see what we had done and see what I could learn. Several years ago, that wish became reality when my spouse had a meeting in Tokyo. I went with her, and our first stop was a pilgrimage to Hiroshima. I didn't know what to expect. What would be the reception to an American, given that my country had harmed them so deeply? And yet it felt imperative to me to go there to learn for myself and honor my mother's peace advocacy. The reception was amazing. We were given small tokens like folded paper cranes this big by a waitress in one restaurant. We were treated with honor and respect, offered umbrellas at the hotel when it was raining. We visited the museum at the Memorial Park and took in the incredible devastation that we saw in video reels and listened to in stories. We saw the atomic bomb dome, which is right under the impact site, where the scaffolding of the dome and the vertical walls are all that is left. We watched people as they rode their bikes to work stop and pray at the Shinto shrines next to the memorial pool. We looked down the length of that pool through an arch that is there that has the name of everyone who was killed and who was lost. We looked past the burning flame and to the dome. We went to the site of the statue of Sadako and saw the thousands and thousands of strings of 1,000 cranes that are sent there every year. What amazed me, and maybe the most, though it's so hard to figure out what was most, was the flame in the memorial pool. I'm used to eternal flames. The first one I saw was as a young child at the grave of John Kennedy. But I learned that in Hiroshima, it is not an eternal flame. That flame will be extinguished when there are no more nuclear weapons. With their losses and their grief and their anger, their whatever, the Japanese people chose to live in hope, to let go of the pain, to let the past be the past, and to work for world peace. We were welcomed, even honored, because we chose to visit them in this sacred spot. Our conference hosts thanked us for doing so. Not at all the reception I had expected. It was a profound lesson in rising from the ashes, not showing bitterness, though I'm sure that still exists, but instead with a steady dream of what could be, of the world they dream about, and that I believe we dream about too. It is hard in the midst of the Israel-Hamas war to imagine such a great change coming to the world. I don't have any words, just deep sorrow, deep confusion, deep desire that it could be different, that we could extinguish that flame in Hiroshima. Wherever you reside on this conflict, I hope we can all agree that it is hell for the people in the middle of it. But what the Japanese taught me is that conflict is survivable. It is possible to make choices that make the world, or even just one congregation, a bit safer, a bit more kind. It involves accepting the complexity of the stories, the role that we've played in the conflict, the listening deeply like Rabbit to Taylor, to see the humanity in each other's eyes, to being able to be held by something greater. Some would call that the love of God, while others would call it the strength and power of community. While Tori is right that living in community is hard, we can also know that the answer is never defined, and that we have the ability to love each other back into community, with appropriate restrictions on things that hurt others, for sure, but there is a way to come back. Knowing that we are not alone, that it's not just about me, but about us. Those appropriate restrictions and the love that comes out of community, all this can help us keep our chalice flame of hope, love, peace, burning brightly into community. May you in this congregation hold that beacon and that flame out to all who are here in your community. And may you, in the words of colleague Joe Cherry, be willing to be so brave, so bold, and so loving. Amen. I invite you now to join in singing our closing hymn, number 1017. As we leave this special place, may the light that you have found here go with you, and carry with you also these words by friend and colleague Wayne Arneson. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone.